Hola Carlos, puede comenzar la grabación. En este momento vamos al aire.
Bueno, bienvenidos todos a esta segunda
I want to
sesión.
welcome everyone to this second session of the third meeting of the Community of Practice for a HydroBID. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you'll find the interpretation icon, which is the globe. You can click on that and access the language of your choice.
To select your language. Bueno, quiero darles la bienvenida. El día de ayer tuvimos una importante, interesante sesiones de alto nivel.
Yesterday we had some very high-level, interesting sessions. We talked to different agency representatives, and today we're going to have some technical discussions. Today you'll have an opportunity to talk about our models, HydroBID, WaterAlloc, and what we're foreseeing for the future. And we also have an important conversation with academia. We wanted to look at what we've done and what we could do to improve the training of young professionals, which is key for us to provide continuity for these tools. Today, I have the honor of introducing the person that was the creator of everything that's happening. He's the one that developed HydroBID, the tool that we began this journey with at the support center. And so I'd like to extend a welcome to Fecado Moreda. Fecado Moreda, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mauro. Everybody, I'm very pleased to be here on this third meeting of HydroBID users. And today we will just, with my colleague Enrique, we will describe the improvements we have done for the last year and a half since you have used or installed HydroBID and WaterAlloc. Next slide. So I would first list the HydroBID improvements, and then Enrique will follow. Next. For the last year, we have improved HydroBID in 7 items. The first one is the project folder output. This was required because when we work on one HydroBID project, you wanted to save all your data in one folder. You don't want to mess up with other basins. So this would allow you to really collect all your data for the project folder. So you have in the HydroBID GUI where you specify the project output. The second important thing we have improved is to add a warm-up period. For those of you hydrologists who are modeling, when you start your model, you want to spend a year or 2 years for just warm-up period to take care of the first initial condition of your basins. And this was requested by a lot of users to increase that by 2 years, by 3 years, depending on the number of data you have. So you have an option. I specified there number 2 in red on the right side, where you can specify the number of years you want to use as a warm-up period. The third one is the model parameters that you have run for one output. We haven't, we don't have a way to save it before, but now go to the next step. Next page, please. Now we have developed a method where you can save your parameters and then see it with the statistics that parameters produced. So you have your model parameters, you have the statistics, and then the graphs together. So you have every information saved for you. So this is one of the improvement that would help you in calibrating the model, following up the results and the parameters. Next. The next improvement we did is in climate data interpolation. Remember, you collect your rainfall, temperature data. And one of the things we wanted to do is to use different units. We have initially, HydroBID forced you to use precipitation only in centimeter units, but now you can choose, depending on the data you have. If your data is in millimeter, then you can choose a millimeter. Internally, the model will convert that into centimeter for you. So this is a good tool that would help you facilitate inputting precipitation data. Next slide. The other improvement we did in the output is when you have your output, some of the data can be summarized into each catchment. For example, mean annual rainfall or mean annual runoff can be summarized for the entire year or the entire simulation into an average, and this can be graphed. So in this version of HydroBID, you have those outputs that can be displayed, as you can see from this, the changes in, for example, you can do changes in runoff or changes in precipitation by having these plotted spatially onto your onto your watershed. And this can be done either using QGIS and the tool that Enrique will describe as soon as I finish. Next. Finally, the most important development we have done is when you calculate, for each catchment flows, that flow can be interpreted into a hydropower, potential hydropower generation. And for this, if you just use a simple formula of power, which is a multiplication of flow and height, the height is the drop of the water, then adding these parameters, gravity and M and N component, you can calculate the potential of the potential hydropower for each catchment or for each routed flows in your basin. So we have added this tool that it's an optional tool. You can add it or not add it. And then finally, after you run your model, for all the catchments, you can actually look at the table that calculates the potential for hydropower. This is a very simple estimate of hydropower generation by river on or without any reservoir. If you just use the water that passes through a section and use H, a drop, then you can calculate the power generated for each catchments. These are the significant improvements we have done. On the other hand, also on QGIS, we have updated the AHD navigation tool that can help you navigate your catchments on any QGIS version, the latest QGIS version. And also in parallel, we have developed WaterAlloc, which Enrique will explain and also show some of the improvements. Enrique.
Yes, I want to introduce Enrique. I missed the introduction of Enrique. Se me olvidó presentarles a Enrique. Enrique es el creador.
I forgot to introduce Enrique. He's the creator of one of the most important components contained in the HydroBID. And it really changed the concept for the tool and gave it a more operational perspective. So Enrique, you have the floor. Thank you, Mauro. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with you today to share some of the advances that we'd achieved with WaterAlloc. As many of you saw yesterday, we talked about what WaterAlloc is, but I'd like to remind everybody and bring everybody up to speed just in case you weren't present yesterday, but WaterAlloc is a model management system that incorporates HydroBID with ModSim, which is a modeling program that has been used in many areas in the world in terms of reservoir management applications, water distribution systems, and certain management of river basins.
Entonces, lo que creamos en WaterAlloc,
So what we created in WaterAlloc is to basically achieve more connectivity between these different modeling programs. And what I wanted to describe is as follows. The tools that we've improved since the last time we presented this tool includes file management capability, some modeling tools. It also includes more tools to calibrate the watershed and basin models. And we also improved the output visualization of the results. There's a module that we incorporated that is a hydroeconomic module, and it'll appear in one of the subsequent slides. The first part of the workflow that we implemented includes integration with the map that we use in WaterAlloc with the HydroBID interface. So the model now makes it easier to look at different subcatchments, and we can start the HydroBID model within that context. So in that sense, we created more automation power for this, and it's a lot easier to do this compared to what we had previously. Likewise, we've implemented the ability to move the data from the map to HydroBID, and now we have more visualization capability of the map based on the output of the hydrological model. We used to use QGIS, and now we can enter this directly on the map, and we can see an example on the next slide. So we can see a window that allows us to select which elements of the HydroBID results we want to visualize on the map itself. And therefore, the result, next slide, please. The next slide shows us how we can see this. We can use a color scale with different magnitudes of the results and visualize from a spatial perspective the HydroBID results for each sub-basin, and we could have a better understanding of the macro dynamics involved in our basin analogy. With these tools that allow us to introduce HydroBID results into the ModSim model, we've also developed a series of tools that allow us to perform calibration with operational flows. And in this way, what we're doing is that we can compare the simulated flow in one station with the HydroBID hydrology and some of the assumptions that we've identified for the basin. And this includes reservoirs and other existing water sources. And we could look at this from the operational flow and observed flow standpoint and subsequently calibrate these data to be able to compare operational flows with measured flows, which is advantageous when we try to calibrate basins that have been worked on extensively in the past, and in the past it was much more difficult to engage in this type of calibration. So what we did was to develop a number of interfaces that allow the user to analyze any errors in the data and visualize how the simulation, the time series simulation is behaving compared with the actual measurement. So these tools have allowed us to improve the manner in which we look at that calibration flow through the use of the HydroBID tools and using also the ModSim tools to be able to calculate operational flows. The last part that I wanted to talk to you about regarding the improvements that we've made in the program relates to this hydroeconomic model. It's a model that can
activar
be activated
y nos permite
in WaterAlloc,
producir
and it allows us to
que
introduce variables
estimar
that allow us to estimate for, say, certain crops,
que tiene, pero
the economic value that they have, but based on the availability of water
pues en este caso
at any given point in time. So in this case, we see an example
parte de usuario,
of the user interface
cual introducimos
in which we introduce
y coeficientes que nos
factors and coefficients that are
estimar la
set aside for each crop type,
resiliencia de
and it allows us to estimate the resilience of that crop
producción anual
based on the availability of water, and then we can come up with a yearly yield average based on the available water.
Vemos que también tenemos un,
We also have
unas ecuaciones que nos permiten
some equations that allow us to assess the economic benefit
a nivel
that we could derive from supplying water at a municipal level. This involves different parameters that allow us to use this demand curve, and through the use of this, we can assess the economic benefit and also the economic impact of not having sufficient water to satisfy these municipal demands. So this hydroeconomic model allows us to enter and use these different parameters to assess the demand that we're simulating, and it also allows us to simulate the availability of water on a per month or even per day basis, and based on these parameters, we can then estimate the economic value that that particular water distribution would have based on the different demands that the system poses. The model allows us to add these values on a yearly basis, these economic values and economic benefits based on water distribution. And it also allows us to compare the benefits with costs. And we can do different types of analysis system-wide based on different infrastructure alternatives or based on water availability. For example, if we have climate change impacts and the water distribution is different in terms of quantity and time, then we can conduct the analysis that will allow us to see how these changes affect the balance in the economic framework of the system. Next, I think that was the last one.
Vale, muchas gracias, Enrique.
Thank you very much, Enrique. Thank you, Fecado. I think that over time, HydroBID has proven to be a very solid tool, and I think that with the addition of WaterAlloc, it becomes one of the best tools that are available anywhere to conduct proper water resource management activities. We'd like to move on to some Q&A. I'd like to thank RTI. We wouldn't be where we are if we didn't have best technicians helping and supporting us. In that sense, RTI is extremely important, and it's also important for me to introduce Reynaldo Garcia from Hydronia, who will be talking to us about what we've been incorporating and the interesting things that we've been doing with HydroBID Flood. Reynaldo, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Mauro. Bueno, yo quería hablarle.
Thank you, Mauro.
Ya presentó
As Mauro already stated, we've already talked about some of the new things that we've seen in terms of HydroBID Flood development. My name is Reynaldo Garcia. I'm the Director of Development in Hydronia Applications in Hydronia, Europe. And the truth is, what I do is head the development group, as well as the applications development group for Hydronia, which is made up of a group of professionals that I've had the good fortune to collaborate with us in this effort that has had a great impact, we believe, for the entire region. Next slide, please. Well, first, just to give you a little bit of context regarding what HydroBID Flood is, the truth is HydroBID Flood is a completely independent model from HydroBID, and it also has different objectives. The main objective for HydroBID Flood is to be a detailed analysis model that allows us to look at the dynamic of rivers and the problems related to flooding. In this sense, it has a number of characteristics and features that distinguish it to other models. On this slide, we're trying to present some of the key features of the model. The model has a series of modules that are also incorporated, as well as other components that I will try to summarize here. On the left, you see the capacity and the performance of the model. It works based on a flexible matrix model. It's a high-performing model that allows us to run multiple processors, and it allows us sufficient performance capability to run several models simultaneously. And we can also work on a cloud-based solution to facilitate high demand runs. We use British units or international units, and as a main user face, we have the QGIS, which is the face of the model that allows us to enter the basic data that it requires, but it also allows us to conduct the visualization. In terms of components, we have components for rainfall and infiltration. In this way, it works as a distributed flood model. It also addresses other infrastructure such as bridges, sewage systems, breaches on dams, spillways, and other gates. The model has a great deal of capability. It works with finite volumes. It can work with dry beds or wet beds, supercritical and subcritical flows in some mountain areas, for example. And it also has a number of modules that includes the sediment transportation module, the flow or the mud and tailings flow module, water quality, as well as crude spills. The main applications for the HydroBID flood model includes detailed evaluations for flooding that allows us to also study river dynamics based on sediment movement. It allows us to determine the extent of the affected areas, calculate the speeds or velocities and depths of the flow. It allows us to assess the efficiency of mitigation structures. We can develop risk maps, analyze any dam breaches, hydraulic components for bridges. It also allows us to automatically create the risk maps, as I stated. We can look at dam breaches or bridge failures. And we can also conduct analysis of urban sewage and drainage systems. When we talk about the evaluation or assessment of urban drainage systems, until very recently was based on surface flooding analysis. And it was treated as a secondary item. And this was due to the fact that the model didn't have a component that addressed that specific issue. So it was based on this calculation matrix that you see here, and we can establish the entire topographic structure of the surface of the entire area. And if we have rainfall, we could also see infiltration. But when we talk about runoff, it was only based on surface runoff. So this is an outcome of this example that came out of the University of Zaragoza. This is a picture, aerial photo of the University of Zaragoza. But as I was stating, we would set aside the secondary collector portion of the drainage systems or sewage systems. For example, anything related to collectors or drainage lines that collect all of the surface water was completely ignored. And therefore, we couldn't really use the model as a tool to design these types of structures. So what we've introduced with the support of the Inter-American Development Bank is a new module for the HydroBID Flood model, which is the UD, the urban drainage or sewage module, which was integrated into the SWIM module, which calculates the traffic in the collector network. But when we use the SWIM model in conjunction with the HydroBID Flood model, then this allows you to do the overall run only once and not having to do it separately with each model. Some of the main capabilities of this urban drainage flood model includes the analysis of surface flooding with a HydroBID flood, but at the same time you could analyze the traffic in the drainage network with the SWIM model. And so you can see what's happening with the flows in the various collectors, and the networks are of an unlimited sizes, and you can conduct a simulation of the exchange of flows between the underground drainage system and the surface water flows. This is supplemented with code that allow for much faster runs through the use of the GPU hardware. Some typical applications for this new model include the design and dimensioning of components for the drainage system for flood control. And we could do this for both surface and underground applications. We also can generate surface flooding maps considering secondary drainage systems, and we can also design control infrastructure to mitigate any overflows where the sewage systems are involved. So this was not available previously. So as I was stating, HydroBID Flood is primarily based on the design of a flexible matrix, and through the QGIS provides users with all of the tools that allow them to create this matrix. This matrix can adapt to the regular profile, and the basic computational model is based on the triangle. Each one of these triangles that you see on the image, for each triangle, we calculate the velocity and depth of the flow in real time. So this gives you a complete vision of the flood through the use of this matrix that can be adapted to the existing surface topography and other elements. The graphic user interface is based on QGIS. We're using the most updated version. So any type of data entry and output is conducted through this environment. Nevertheless, when we talk about the drainage network, let's go back one, thank you. This is done through the SWIM model. And this allows users, if you already have the SWIM model, many cities already use the SWIM model, you can incorporate that data without making any changes. HydroBID Flood can read the data directly from the drainage system, and it can incorporate it into the surface area matrix. The capability of being able to use graphical processing units, which are very high performing tools, is an intrinsic component of the model, and it allows us to maximize the capability for these cards that can run the model up to 700 times faster than the previous version. So for larger applications in larger cities, this is highly recommendable to use this module with the GPU. At present, we're about to begin a pilot in the city of Santa Fe, Argentina, where we will be using this module in a certain portion of the city.
As I was saying, we're working with the most recent QGIS version. Right now it's 3.16. And for implementing a HydroBID flood model, what we do first is put together the whole swim structure within the user interface itself for EPA swim, which is free access. Then we use HydroBID flood and QGIS to do the superficial part, and this communicates automatically. So the model runs in an integrated fashion with both groundwater and surface water. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk to you about a test case briefly in Glasgow, where there's an underground sewer and surface flows. This is the sewer, and you can see that there's overflow at one of these points. Of the underground pipe. This pipe overflows and the water goes to the surface. Next slide, please. Once the water flows to the surface from the underground sewer, in this case specifically, there is flooding in a housing area you can see in the image. So the model allows us to establish a new design in order to improve this situation. In conclusion, then, what I wanted to explain was the integration of HydroBID flood with the SWIM model, which is a possibility for any project one would like to conduct in the region. As I said, we will start a pilot project in the city of Santa Fe, and we are very anxious to get this started. We think this will have a big impact in the city. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Reynaldo. I think that HydroBID flood as a model already had a high impact because it filled an area with studies and details that previously we could not use with HydroBID. And now that I think that with SWIM, we'll be talking about designing urban drainage, which is an issue that was very much necessary in the region and interesting to the division as well. Do we have time? I'm not sure, Carlos. Are there any questions about HydroBID that you might have? Yes, hi Mauro, good afternoon. There's a lot of activity in our Q&A section. Luis Mora asks us, what are the advantages or the differences between WaterAlloc ModSim compared to WIB when it comes to managing demand? Thank you, Mauro. Thank you for that question. WaterAlloc, what WaterAlloc allows us to do is use the ModSim tools to simulate demand. Now, WIP is a model with some similar characteristics that does simulate demand and then distributes water based on hydrology. So what we can do with WaterAlloc is integrate these two systems automatically. And we have been able to use the ModSim tools to simulate demand, and we have built several tools in WaterAlloc in order to somewhat improve our ability to simulate agricultural demand, domestic demand, and use ModSim's features to simulate electrical power generation. Now, so there aren't any gigantic differences. The most important thing is that if we use HydroBID as users, we have a tool now that allows us to simulate demand, to simulate water distribution, and it connects both of these models automatically. Great, thank you, Enrique. We're also going to bring up a poll. You'll see it on your screen, and we ask you to answer those questions. I'm going to ask Reynaldo a question that was asked yesterday, which was, does HydroBID flood also deal with dam breaks? I think that question was asked several times yesterday. Yes, indeed, the model can simulate these types of events. There's a series of tools that can be used in order to do so. For example, one of the tools is dam breach. For the case of dam breaches, you can establish a dam within the calculation mesh represented by a line, and there you can establish how that dam would breach over time. So once that dam with a reservoir full of water through that breach, then we would see water flows that could flood the lower area. So this is one of the tools we have, but there are other tools available as well for analyzing dams, not only water dams, but dams for hyper-concentrated materials such as mine tailings dams, which are extremely important throughout the region. Great, thank you, Reynaldo. Our chat, our Q&A chat is extremely active, but we're going to move on. I wanted to go a step beyond. We've talked about what we did this year. Now I wanted to look at what is coming. What's next? What do we see coming? And there will be a chance for more questions in that regard, but people are very much interested in where we're going. So I'd like to start first with Enrique Pecado. I was wondering about where HydroBID is going.
Gracias, Mauro.
Thank you, Mauro.
Aquí tenemos una lista de
Here we have a list of several ideas
entreteniendo
that we have entertained for next year.
y pues más que digamos hablar de exactamente
And more than just talking about the details, then we wanted to show these to you to give you an idea of where we are going.
Pecado, you wanna
Yes.
talk a little bit about the HydroBID?
Yes.
¿Quieres hablar un poco de HydroBID?
Yes. Thanks so much for the opportunity. So HydroBID, when we started, it was just a small rainfall runoff program. Now it's developed to kind of a system where we can actually look at the complete water resources. And before also we used HydroBID with WIP. I think there was a question about comparison of WIP and WaterAlloc, which are comparable programs. But the most important thing is that HydroBID comes with the centralized database. The database we have, we created AHD, Analytical Hydrography Dataset, and the parameters for HydroBID are all pre-calculated. So if you want to build a model by WIP, you have to build that data every time you go from one basin to the other basin. But in this case, we have all the data centralized at one place. So our next future production would be, improvement would be in creating, actually consolidating this database on a regional level. Let's say on a country level, for example, for Peru or Colombia, we want to create all the hydrological database that HydroBID and WaterAlloc uses, and also people can have their own model running from that database instead of everybody having a copy. Then we would have a centralized database. That's where we are going. That would allow access to download or upload the data, access to upload simulation data, not just observer data. And also it would allow regional and country level water balances. That would help us develop, scenario developments where we are going with WaterAlloc. Thank you.
Exactly. Y cuando hablamos de la ciudad de WaterAlloc, pues
Sure, when we're talking about WaterAlloc, going along with this idea of the centralized database, we want to implement several concepts for systems management within WaterAlloc. Within the database, then, we would be able to store the runs, inputs and outputs of the different scenarios that we run, and HydroBID would help organize these analyses. We are also developing, and we have started to develop, an optimization model in order to include a combined simulation of operations and hydrology in a model that would allow us to optimize our reservoir operations or operations regarding distribution of water pumping, groundwater pumping, and we have a few ideas when it comes to making improvements with GISs. Within the user window in WaterAlloc, the idea is to help the model use more functions there. And these are a few of the tools that we have thought of and we have started to develop for the future. Great, thank you very much. I think I want one thing to be clear for everyone who is listening, and all members of the community of practice know this, which is one thing is that we move with time. The model created in 2012, it had certain characteristics, but it's grown as technology advances, and it's grown also as far as satisfying the needs of our clients. That is what our customers need, what they need for planning and for decision making. So it's important to look at this incredible permanent ongoing growth process of these tools. And it's not mentioned here, but we're going to launch a series of platforms as well in this coming year that will allow people to download information that they can use, and not only with HydroBID models, but models in general. So I believe that that is a very important thing to know, and that there's no stopping it. I wanted to talk about the same thing with Reynaldo. Apparently HydroBID Flood leads to many questions, and it will allow us to make tremendous progress. I'm very curious to know what is being envisioned, what new things are coming down the line with HydroBID Flood. How far do you think this can go? Sure, well, there's a series of proposals that we have in mind that have actually already begun. We've started working on some prototypes, and I think one of the most interesting ones to me, because of how useful or impactful it might be when it comes to evaluating works, infrastructure works, using a detailed hydraulic model of this type, and that's including cost analyses and damage due to floods. Currently, with HydroBID Flood, you can run a simulation, for example, on existing conditions in a river, and you can look at how this river might flood an urban area. And you can also use this model to assess proposed works that are to be built in order to mitigate this flooding. But currently, there is no way, at least no automated way, to run an economic analysis to compare alternatives when it comes to these works to determine which one might be the most optimum one, economically speaking, for flood mitigation. So what we aim to do is to bring this component into the process, that is, knowing the vulnerability of a certain area when faced with a series of floods. How can each building then have its own economic function or losses? What might its particular losses be if there were a specific flood event? So it's an idea of mixing the model component with the results of flow depth and velocity with the vulnerability of the area in order to determine cost maps of costs due to the flooding. Having a cost map, a spatial map, would then show us all of the different areas and the distribution of damages of a flood in economic terms. We could then compare different maps, for example, the map of the current scenario, and then what the situation would be with works and what the economic impact of these works would be on this urban area. So we think that this component is extremely useful. It's relatively simple to implement. I think the most complex part would be actually evaluating costs. But it's not really out of reach. It's not beyond what we can do within HydroBID Flood. So I think that this is an area of progress that we need to delve into and look at developing HydroBID Flood in that regard in the future. This is extremely interesting, I think, especially because when we're talking about investments, when we talk about mitigating floods, we're wondering what damage are we avoiding, and the idea is assigning a financial value to that. That's very important for any municipality or region to evaluate, well, is this work that we're currently building, is it worth it, or should we adopt a different kind of measure? So I think that that is very interesting. We have a lot of questions, Carlos. I was wondering if you have one you'd like to pull out to start. I'd like to say that if there are questions we're not able to get to during the session, we will answer them and we will email them to you so that everyone has the answer to these questions, because there are a lot of questions out there, and I'd like to thank all of you for your interest. Carlos, any questions you'd like to start with? Of course, Mauro. To start, we have a question about transportation equations. Fernando Watson asks, what sediment transport equations are included? Sediment transport equations.
Yeah, I think we have two transport equations that we have used, and the first one is the one commonly used, the universal soil loss equation, US, and that's basically estimates the amount of natural erosion that occurs during the runoff period. And the other one is the one which is particularly applied in Argentina in HydroBID. That requires really a specific data from that region, and we don't have enough data for that. Then there are two equations that we are using.
Vale. Thank you, Ricardo. Yo voy a leerle una pregunta que llegó aquí.
I'm going to read a question, a very interesting question for Reynaldo here. It's in English.
It says, I want to find out, how does the use of a flexible mesh in HydroBID Flood compare with a uniform grid system in some other models in terms of time of development and accuracy?
Okay, very interesting question. I don't really see any disadvantage of the flexible mesh with respect to square grid. In the past, generating a mesh was something complicated. The tools we have implemented in QGIS for HydroBID Flood have all the tools necessary to generate the mesh automatically. There are several tools that you can use to refine the mesh around a street or a building or you know, a levee or any other structure. You can refine the mesh in the river channel, and you can add all kinds of refinement, break lines, and many other features that help you to automatically generate the mesh. So once the mesh is generated, as I mentioned, every triangle in the mesh, it's a computational unit. So you can use it to, the model used that for computing every cell. Now the model code is highly optimized. It's a high performance computing code. It's a code written in C, in native C, with some low levels optimizations, and it uses parallelization both in the CPU environment and also in graphic processing units. You can use cards that nowadays have thousands of processors. So the end result is that the flexible mesh model can outperform any other model that we have tested it against. So even square grid models or even other flexible mesh models, because of their optimization of using parallel computing. So there are virtually no disadvantages. On the contrary, it's all advantages, because the flexible mesh allows you to adapt to many different environments that the square grid element mesh does not allow.
Ok, gracias, sí. Gracias, Reinaldo. Una buena explicación.
Thank you, Reinaldo. That's a good explanation. We have a lot of questions, and we don't have that much time during virtual meetings. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at all of the remaining questions. They're all very relevant and very timely. We're going to send them to you to get your answers, and then we are going to send these to today's participants so that everyone gets this information. So if you need information as well, Carlos is going to write my email address in the chat. He's going to include his as well. You can get in touch with either one of us for any specific questions or requests for implementation. So if you are interested in those topics, you'll have our emails. And go to our website, which is hydrobidlac.org. Fecado, muchas
Hubiera sido bueno tener
thank you, everyone. I wish we had had a lot more time because we have more than 20 questions on these topics in the Q&A. People are very much interested in this, and a lot of people who are friends of this initiative who want to know how to keep working on it and add the new components that we have explained.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much, all of you, for being part of the sesh and this amazing experience we had since, well, HydroBID since 12, no? That's a long more than the time that I have in the BID, in IDB. Y bueno, Reinaldo con el HydroBID Flood. Así que les agradezco mucho.
Reinaldo, I would like to thank you. I'd like to thank everyone. And we're going to play a short video for anyone who's interested in learning a little more about HydroBID. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
¿Quieres contribuir a un mejor manejo de agua?
Would you like to contribute to better water management? HydroBID is a digital tool that is high-tech, created by the IDB to support the efficient planning and management of water resources. This technology is available to everyone, and you can learn to use it. Around 1,400 people in Latin America and the Caribbean have trained using the online course. Over 23 countries in the region use this tool. Learn to use HydroBID and conduct hydrologic simulations from your own country. Experience virtual learning in an active and practical way with a student-tutor relationship from anywhere. There are 4 modules. The detailed use of HydroBID during the simulation, the use of the model, analysis, and results. Today is the first step to become a part of decisions for the future. Sign up today.
Bueno, hay una gran cantidad de personas
All right.
que han aprovechado de
A lot of people have already taken this online course, so sign up. It is a very interesting tool. It's good for learning about HydroBID. We're going to improve it, broaden it. There will be expert tutors available who will mentor you throughout the process. And we can talk to one of our guests about this today because these people have been making the most of this. We'll move on to a very important topic. We know that progress in many areas having to do with water resources starts from teaching and learning. And in academia, there's a huge amount of knowledge available that is useful for the work that we do in developing these tools. So for the support center, support from academia has always been important. And from the beginning, we have been connecting with academia when we have a good relationship with many centers. We have 4 guests today, 4 friends, 3 at the regional level, and Mercedes is online from Spain. We're going to hear about their experience with HydroBID, and we'll learn about what we can do to improve in this area. So we have Verónica Beresteroy from the National University of Itapúa, Paraguay, which was the first university that we were in contact with from the HydroBID Support Center. We have Marta Paris from the National University of the Litoral Santa Fe. We've exchanged quite a bit of information, and we developed a program together, a graduate program in water resources, which was a very interesting experience. We have Darwin Mena from the University of Santo Tomas, and a university we work with, and they have a lot of experience supporting students who use HydroBID, and Mercedes Echegaray from the first meeting of the Community of Practice. She is a professor for the master's degree in hydrology and water resource management, and they use this book to help her students, many of whom are from Latin America, to learn about this tool and to use it throughout the process of obtaining a master's degree. So I would like to welcome all of you. It's a pleasure to have you all online with us today. And I would like to start, well, let's start in order what we see on the screen. We'll start with Veronica. Talk to us a little about your experience, and especially talk to us about how interested students are in this tool in Itapúa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mauro, for your introduction. Well, from the National Itapúa University, as Mauro said, we were the first university to join through a final project where HydroBID was used for the degree. It was a basin in the region. This was in 2017. Now, after that year, we started to discuss HydroBID in the academic sector. We organized 2 short courses with Dr. Neso in 2017 and 2018 in the university. And based on these courses then, we were in touch with the Catholic University of Asunción to conduct a 3rd course in Paraguay, which was a more extensive course, and this was held in the city of Asunción. Now this year, as I mentioned, the university has been involved in outreach about this tool. We were very active. We attended seminars, workshops, and other courses on water resource management, and we shared the different applications of the tool and what can be done using this tool. This year, from the Water Observatory, which is an agency of a department of the university, its mission is to promote integrated management of water resources in a sustainable fashion throughout Paraguay, with an emphasis on the southern region of the country and the banks of the Paraná River. We're using HydroBID in several basins in this area, and the idea is to establish this tool as a permanent tool, so that in academia we can generate useful information for research and academia, as well as for different institutions who are those who make decisions or who need information that we can provide. So as far as what students think about the tool or what their interest is, I'll talk a bit about my own personal experience. I transitioned from a student to a professional with HydroBID, and so my interest came about based on a tweet. I saw information about it in a tweet. I started to look at the tool. I trained, I used it, and now I'm also a tutor, a virtual tutor on this tool, as well as an in-person tutor starting last year. and I have trained different stakeholders on using this tool. Now, when it comes to students' opinions in general, I've realized that it's very important because every time that I had the chance to be involved or explain something about this tool, students always come up to me and they ask me how to sign up for a course or how to learn about this tool.
In fact, at a webinar that we coordinated this year with the university, we had a large number of people that enrolled in the online course because they were interested in learning and they were really interested in the various applications that they could undertake with the different tools and in different arenas. Yes, as I recall, that was an enormously successful webinar. You had more than 300 people sign up. And as Veronica stated, she started as a student. She then began giving tutoring services to other fellow students, and she became subsequently a certified user. And she worked for the Bolivian Ministry of Water and the Environment. So she has a very complete career path. She started as a student, she got her degree, and she's grown enormously professionally through the use of this initiative, and she's made us very proud. Thank you, Veronica. Moving on to Marta, we have a very close relationship with Marta, with the National Litoral University in Santa Fe. One of the first projects with HydroBID Flood was done with Santa Fe. Marta, I had a question for you. This experience developed by the universities, did this remain in the university, or how can we use this effort to support the work carried out by public agencies? How can we take this out into the professional arena? Well, first and foremost, thank you for the invitation to participate in this space. And I want to say definitively that this did not remain in academia, and that's a good thing. If we could just establish a very brief timeline in the entire trajectory in this relationship with the HydroBID initiative, we'd have to go back to 2016 when we began to work on this at a RTI meeting, which is a network of centers of excellence in Latin America that focuses on water management resources. And so we discussed the creation of a graduate course in academia. In fact, we did so in 2017. We offered a master's degree in water resource management. Now, as part of that same RTI network, we saw this HydroBID initiative, and we considered it to be a really good one to talk to other ministers of water resources management in the region and in the entire nation. And it was important for environmental issues as well. So HydroBID allows us to simulate hydrology phenomena, and we could do so for incidents in the past and in the present and in the future. And so the idea would be to try to understand these environmental flows. So we were starting this in academia. We started reaching out to different water resource managers nationwide. We subsequently started talking about the need of having a more profound training program to be able to apply HydroBID, especially in a difficult region, such as in non-typical hydrology systems in some of these rural areas. And so we established an agreement with the city government of Santa Fe to be able to provide this training. And we trained university professors, and we created institutional teams along with representatives of the local governments, as well as the National Water Institute. So you all know about the basin project that we conducted and that we used for that training, but there were two other specific cases that also addressed the issues of the Santa Fe metropolitan area, and that at the present time are being considered by the city government. And the city government, as Reynaldo was saying, is also considering other projects. but now the provincial government that is dealing with these other cases, because they see a lot of potential in this tool for decision making. One of the basins, the Los Padres watershed, is one of the projects that we seek to work on to create a regulatory framework. Within academia, we've also seen some results that we can share. One of our professors was a guidance counselor for this effort. We worked with some universities in Costa Rica. We have published some of our project results in peer-reviewed publications. And so HydroBID is starting to incorporate itself into many degree programs. It's not just in academia anymore. We're also trying to ensure that we build a bridge, that we build synergies and partnerships with decision-making authorities. And we will continue in this process. I think that the best example of how we could transition from academia into the actual field of project work at the institutional level, you're talking about an excellent example that you have exemplified. And so we congratulate you for your great work. Now I'd like to introduce Darwin. We met him in Bogota. He's really a very active person with his students. He's got people doing their thesis work using HydroBID. And I wanted to ask, how do you believe the development of these tools supports the curriculum for the hydrology resources degree program? Well, thank you for the invitation, Mauro. In our environmental engineering school at the Santo Tomas University, we began with this work with HydroBID in 2017. We had a short training program that was available to us. And from that point on, we began to incorporate all of these modeling tools as well as management tools as part of the curriculum, to such an extent that when we talk about the undergrad level, we have the ability to consider a basic hydrology course. Now, it would cover some basic terminology or basic concepts, but it wouldn't go further. But based on the experience that we had with HydroBID, we created within the environmental engineering school a water management resource degree program whereby students can develop skills and knowledge to be able to manage water resources at the watershed level through the use of IT tools. And the main tool in that suite of tools would be HydroBID. Part of that then has led to the development of graduate work, different research projects financed by the university. And in these projects, we've applied the use of this tool. Many of these projects have been published in peer-reviewed publications at the national and international level, and they've had a great impact. And parting from that knowledge and that experience that we've seen with HydroBID in the environmental engineering program, we then went to the dean's office and we created the graduate degree program for watershed management. So we've taken this tool from its beginnings to a graduate degree program, and many graduate students are using HydroBID tools for their thesis work in their graduate programs. We have added WaterAlloc into their portfolio of tools, and we've added the tools to the curriculum of modern tool applications, which are very useful for decision making when it comes to watershed management or water resource management. And in this case, we're talking about research projects where we expect to be able to have contact with environmental authorities to be able to carry all of this knowledge and information that we are generating and present it to decision makers in different parts of our country to create that synergy between academia and the state to be able to improve this decision-making process with better information. Thank you, Darwin. It's clear to me that your work has been very intensive and really interesting. I see great things in Colombia's future. You know, as always, that we're always available to support you and to work with you. So thank you for your efforts. And remember, you can always count on us for whatever your needs may be. Now, we have a very interesting experience because it was born from the meeting that we had in the community in Lima. They have an interesting degree program, a graduate program on hydrology at the University of Alcalá in Spain. I was invited to participate in a conference there for a few days. And interestingly, I cultivated a relationship there between the session, the university. And I wanted to thank Mercedes for joining us today and ask her, what role has HydroBID had in your graduate program curriculum in the University of Alcalá during the last few years? You are muted, Mercedes. Well, good evening to everyone from Spain. First and foremost, I wanted to thank Mauro for always being available in helping us with our master's degree program on hydrology. We created the degree program in 2006, and it was created to fill a gap that we had at the university. And we had a lot of smaller short-term courses, but in some cases, we didn't really see a lot of practical applications. And so this graduate degree program was an initiative of a number of professors at the University of Alcalá, primarily Professor Irene Bustamante. And we created a curriculum that we started in 2006, and that included 60 professors with different specialties and fields of specialization, and from different institutions, not all of them linked to academia. We have professional people, university people, even other different representatives from the private and public sector. So all of us together, we created a graduate degree program, 60 credits. And from the beginning, we saw many requests by people in the Latin American space. We saw many applications from Spanish undergrads, but there was a significant number of Latin American undergrads that wanted to come to Spain to do their graduate degree program. We couldn't really meet everybody's demands. We had about 800, 900 applications, but we only had 30 to 35 positions for students. So after some time, we thought it would be prudent for us to start trying to meet these requests from the Latin American students. And instead of having an in-person curriculum where students would travel to Spain and attend class in person and so on, we decided to provide instruction through the use of remote technology. It wasn't precisely a webinar, but we did use some online tools. And so the practical aspect of the coursework was conducted in a Latin American city. We did some projects in Quito, in Santiago, and other cities. And as a result of the first HydroBID meeting that I attended, not as a representative of academia, but rather as a specialist from Spain, we saw the possibility of creating greater synergy with the IDB. And I want to thank Mauro and his proverbial generosity. And in the hybrid version of our curriculum, we were able to have Mauro instruct some of our students that were part of our program. We saw that as an important progress, but clearly the in-person students also needed to have access to this modeling tool that was so simple, that was so adaptable, and that was so easy to use. Therefore, once again, I want to thank the IDB for their generosity. The IDB created a training program, a workshop that was undertaken last year, and it was offered to students who wanted to enroll with a ridiculously low price and get training on the HydroBID platform. I can say, just in terms of some numbers, the hybrid version of our master's program, since its creation in 2014, 77% of our students have been from Latin America. And in the in-person program that we started in 2006, 30% of our students are from Latin America, which means that the demand is there. There's a clear-cut need for knowledge and information, and we have an obligation as an academic institution in meeting those demands. It appears that we've been able to mention Spanish examples and other examples in Spain, but with the HydroBID tool, we can take that Spanish side of the master's graduate degree program and make the coursework available to any student who's interested in taking it. I will conclude with the following. We've had a number of projects at the graduate student level. We've had Professor Juan Antonio Pascual from the University of Valencia collaborate with us. We've published 3 of these graduate projects in peer-reviewed publications. We've also conducted projects with HydroBID, and of the 3 that have been published in the Geomatic journal, we were able to include projects involving the Chicomoya and Cobello rivers in Colombia. And in the Uruguay project, we did a study on the repercussions and impact derived from climate change. We are infinitely grateful to the Inter-American Development Bank and to Mauro in particular for the openness and the flexibility in letting us offer some alternative options for our students, and for being wonderful role models from our colonial brothers in the Americas. When we talk about local management issues, this seems to bring us together, and it seems to help people learn in a much better way. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mercedes. And you can always continue to count on our support. I think that what you're doing there in Spain is very interesting. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I think Fecado.
Fecado, if you have just 1 minute, but you can talk.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, it's very exciting to hear all of this application of HydroBID, especially in academia, because the first application we had was in water resource authorities, but I think academia is where we need to focus so that we can apply that in next generation. And I really want to thank Mauro for this. He was not there at the beginning when we started, but his joining IDB really emphasized the use of HydroBID in academia, and also being openness, helping others, always being positive to apply this model all over the Latin America. And I want to assure you that this model is going to be not only for Latin America. We are trying to use the same approach in Africa and Asia, and I hope the next meeting we have would be an international one, so we can meet everybody from corner of the world. I really thank you so much for everybody for your confidence on HydroBID, just to use it as a tool to teach students basic hydrology. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fecado. These were just amazing closing words for the event. So, bueno, quiero agradecerles a todos. Se nos acaba el tiempo. Muchísimas gracias a todos los que participaron.
I want to thank everybody who joined us. Thank you for dedicating us this time. There are many more actors that are joining us. We have the Tomagüe University. We have the San Andres University that wants to work with us. So this is a growing community, and I hope that this continues. We have universities in Venezuela, the University of Los Andes, and so we hope that this community will continue to grow. I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank the people that helped us with the coordination of this event. Carlos, Serena, the technical team, Ana Maria, Giovanna on the communication side, all of the work done behind the scenes. Putting together a webinar like this is hard work. So I want to thank you for joining us. Hopefully we'll be able to meet next year in an in-person format, but we hope to be able to continue supporting your efforts and that this continues to grow because its success is based entirely on your efforts. Once again, thank you very much and hope to see you soon. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.